The National Human Rights Commission says it will ensure that human rights of voters are protected after the general elections. Executive Secretary of the Commission, Tony Ojukwu, said this in Abuja at the inauguration of the General Election Human Rights Situation Room.
The Commission is acting in line with its mandate as stated in sections 14, section 5A, B, J of the Act of 2010 as amended. The focus of the Situation Room will be primarily targeted in reports of the human rights issues that will be at play during the elections. The Human Rights Situation Room will also receive and treat from across the 36 states of the FCT complaints on human rights violations, sexual and gender-based violence, and all other election-related human rights violations. Things like hate speech can be reported. Things like any sexual and gender-based violence that are related to elections can be reported. Things like abuse, brutality by the police, restriction of access, vote buying. All these, the Situation Room is giving us opportunity to report this from any part of the country.
And to speak more on the Saturday's election from the perspective of international observer, we have in the studio Peter Manu, who is the former national chairman of Ghana's ruling party, and he leads the Democratic Union of Africa Observer Mission to Nigeria for the election. Very warm welcome to Nigeria and to Arise News. Now, from the international perspective, what would you say are the high points of Nigeria's 2023 elections, which begins in a few hours from now?
Thank you very much. I think so far the INEC has done well. They have introduced technology into the electoral process to bring transparency, openness, and show of professionalism in the upcoming elections. And that is good. That is good because at the end of the day, when the results come out, we want the winners and the losers to both accept it so that post-election violence will not be up in Nigeria this time around. So the preparation so far, the deployment of essential materials, in spite of the rumors about scarcity of fuel and cash. But we are told that the central bank has given INEC sufficient cash for its operations today, tomorrow, and the next, which is good. So for me, the upcoming elections is showing an upsurge in democratic values for Nigeria, for that matter, ECOWAS region. And it must be applauded.
Indeed. And I mean, one will wonder why these elections are so important. Nigeria does have the largest population on the continent, we do understand that, but so many observers come every election cycle to observe the elections in Nigeria, such as you. Why is the Nigerian election so important to Africa, to the world, and to observers like you?
First, you rightly said it, the population of Nigeria is important to Africa and ECOWAS. So its democracy is also of essence. I keep saying that countries in ECOWAS must always pray that there's peace and stability in Nigeria. Otherwise, we cannot contain the spillover. So Nigeria takes the lead and to be able to give and take the other countries along, just as Japan did in the Southeast Asia. So for me, Nigeria's election is critical, not only for Ghana and Africa, but the world, because it is a new dimension. It gives new dimension to democracy, multi-party democracy in Africa. And for that matter, what goes with these democracies, freedom of speech, freedom of enterprise, human rights respect, equal opportunities, etc., are things that will come our way and that will increase our living standards for the betterment of society, Nigeria in particular.
Absolutely, well said. But Even as Nigeria tries to be a shining light, you know, in Africa and the sub-region in West Africa, we still see some deviant, some undemocratic tendencies, like Mali, for example, in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, and the rest. Is Nigeria really sending the right signals to some of these countries, just like you said? Are we truly a shining light for the continent and for the sub-region?
Very well so. Very well so. And this was echoed by the President Buhari, in his speech in the United Nations, where he unequivocally stated that he is going to champion multi-party democracy and he will leave a legacy as far as elections are concerned. And we must applaud him for that. And that will send a signal to the rest of the coup makers that coup does not solve problems in Africa. Rather, the ability for people to speak up their minds, competition, that is the way to go.
And for those who don't know, can you just tell us what election observers such as yourself do, and when do you begin to observe the elections? Is it on the day of the elections, before or after? And I also want you to paint a picture for us, because we do know, like we've established, Nigeria is the largest population on the continent of Africa. We have over 176,000 polling units. Authorities have also identified some hot spots ahead of these elections. So what do observers like you do? Do you intend to go to those hot spots to observe what elections is like? Or do you choose where to go to observe the elections?
Thank you very much. Observation is in two fronts, long term and short. The long term is to the extent that election is a process, and it begins with voter registration, PVC collection, etc., till the D-Day and post-D-Day transmission of results, etc. So we come in long term to observe the registration, the collection of PVCs. And I must hail Nigerians for the ability of voters to collect as much as 93% of PVCs. That's part of the process. So it means, it gives me a sense that voter turnout is going to be high. Having said that, you come to the voting process itself, which begins with deployment of materials. That started maybe 2-3 days ago, from federal to the states.
Yes.
The state resident electoral commissioners and their warehouses very well secured. That's where the security forces come in. Then they would deploy in turn to the local government areas, from there to the area, electoral area precincts. Then in the morning, it is dispatched to the polling units. We have to follow and track that all these, including the various essential things like the result sheets, the biometric identification machines, the IREV, etc., are all dispatched to their specific locations, polling units, because they are not interconnected. So if they messed up, then it's going to create problem. They are standalone equipment. I'm talking about the beavers. So if they are not well distributed to the specific polling units, they can create problems on the election day, and people will queue for a long time, and they will
not be able to vote.
So for observers, we look at all this. Then we look at the gender parity of officials who are manning the police stations, the presiding officers, the assistants, the collation officers, etc. How are women involved? Then the people with disability. So the elections are supposed to be inclusive as far as possible. And this is where the question you ask about troubles and harassments in various places. The IDPs, internally displaced people, must be given an opportunity to also vote. After all, though they have been internally displaced, they are still citizens of the Republic of Nigeria. So INEC and the security forces must protect them and give them access to exercise their franchise. These are some of the things we talk about.
Okay, very well
As
said,
observers,
Peter.
we
Just
look
before we let you go quickly, let's take, a universal look from the African perspective of elections in Africa. Where do you think that the people are being educated enough in the area of choice against pecuniary inducement of the voters?
I have said again and again that we should not take voters for granted. Voters are discerning, and that some people will take your money, but once they get into the cubicle, which we describe as secrecy of the vote, and in this regard, let me shout that we should not allow people to go in with smartphones to take pictures of the ballot paper, who they voted for. Otherwise, people will use their own instincts of what is worrying them and who can help.
So it's an African thing.
It's an African thing. It's an African thing. But I may add that there have been series of talks. There's have been series of education. And I can say on authority, and it has even happened in Nigeria. In 2015, President Buhari won the government from opposition.
Yes.
I do not think that he had more resources than the incumbent Jonathan. But the voters were discerning and they said, we want Buhari. So no amount of money that was given to them could change their mindset. So we should not always think that people can buy people's vote and win, because people are discerning. And a poll undertaken by CDD Ghana established that 65% of Ghanaians were saying, we will take your money, but
and
when we
vote our
go
conscience.
we will vote our conscience. So we should not take the voters for granted. Another aspect of vote buying is what we call treating. You buy food for people, you give them clothing, etc. But mind you, people will be in the queue from sometimes 6 a.m. up to maybe 2. So depending on how smooth sailing the voting process comes to, people will become hungry. Political parties can buy food for their people. Would you call that amount of treating vote buying or what?
Or inducement?
Or inducement?
Well, good question,
Good question.
For both the electorate observers, the electoral umpires
That's
in
right.
the continent
That's right.
Thank you
to
so
interrogate.
much. Indeed, indeed. The elections are evolving. We do appreciate the time you've spent with us on the news tonight. Peter Manu is the former national chairman of Ghana's ruling party, and he leads the Democratic Union of Africa Observer Mission to Nigeria for the elections on Saturday.